morning, good evening, good afternoon, folks. It's the notorious V, the Gorilla Economist, coming to you live on this edition of Rogue News in the Morning, presenting the Dark Raven of the Deep State himself, the one and only Veles. He needs no introduction. And folks, I hope you got your dark roast ready. I hope you got your notebook steady, because we're about to run the gambit of the deep state information that's going on behind the scenes, the play-by-play, and all the other things that are not fit to print. You'll hear it right here on V for Veles. And with that being said, Veles, it's great for me to be back with you. I've been MIA, a lot of things going on, but we're back together, brother.
You've been rumor and innuendo for
Yes.
quite some time.
Exactly, brother.
He is back live with all of us. So for all of you out there, it's V and Veles back together again. V, any updates for the audience or thoughts for the audience before we get going?
No, I mean, oh yes, guys, I have exciting news. Look, it's been long in coming. We dumped a great deal of coin in terms of investings, and to get our official app professionally done by an actual real development team, not somebody in like Kathmandu or somebody hanging out in in some slum in New Delhi. But we got a professional dev team. These guys have worked with Fortune 100s. They're doing our app. And for those that don't know, Rogue will be ESW very shortly. That's Exit Strategy World. And so we're going to be known as Rogue ESW for the time being. The app is going to be outrageous. We have full on writers that are going to be writing for it, content creators, and our regular guest guys like Veles, me, Matthew Eric, Cowboy, Harley. We're all coming back. So the app is set to launch probably June. I'm going to see the finished beta this Monday. I'm excited to see that. That's going to be awesome. So that's the latest news, guys. That's why I haven't been doing much here. Just been working. But if I'm not working, I haven't been doing much on Rogue because I want these changes to get done. And then we're going to go full force. And then it's back to the regularly scheduled Monday through Fridays, 11 a.m., rock and roll. And it's going to be right here. We're going to hit it live. We're going to do it better than nobody else can. Nobody can mess with us on the geopolitical, the geoeconomic, and the geostrategic. Just really, we are in a very rare air. So that being said, Veles, man, glad to have you back on with me, man.
Glad to have you and I together on the air again. Always thankful for Algo's air support and our post presentation commentary after the fact as well. So it's a team effort, folks, and stay tuned because we've got amazing things coming and new things coming and stuff, because God knows the disinformation isn't going to stop. So with that one, I'm going to roll into today's program. Mike Moore.
Your audio is a little tinny.
Oh.
What's your audio source?
Headset?
It is. Headset, okay. And it's showing headset on your thing, right? In your settings?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. No worries. Just go for it.
Okay. As I double check my settings. So Mike Moore on Friday, May 2nd, had a really good comment about the state of several folks on social media. He said a lot of people who appear on social media, whether social similar, are technically lobbyists. Not to be
say that again. Social media lobbyists
are unregistered lobbyists.
Mm.
Hang on just a tick here.
Yeah.
Headset. No, I'm on the headset.
It's weird. How does Veles sound, guys? Maybe it's on my end.
Bueller.
Bueller? Anybody? Anyway, go ahead, Veles. Just keep rocking. Okay. Sorry to mess with you slow.
Oh, it is glitching. Okay, I don't know why. I got solid signal and everything looks okay.
Messing with us now.
I don't joke about that. So what do you call it? His comment was the giveaway is often they're pushing various interpretations who often match one another. And for me, it's people who wear hats like Tim Pool. Not to beat up on Tim too much, there's at least 3 other folks out there who do the same thing. There's a guy out there who's an interviewer who has gun range like ball caps with a U.S. flag on it. I feel about those types of folks as I do about the official white supremacists in Washington, D.C. and all the matching outfits. Moore's main takeaway was specifically those influencers who attempt to portray themselves as journalists. Recall something I shared with you a few months ago. There's literally a history at U.S. intelligence agencies of folks who don't work out internally being offered the opportunity to become a social influencer, especially if they're good on air. So I've got a section I'm going to return to something I did previously, which is just kind of some news appetizers before we get into some more substantive content. The private equity view on the economy have shared previously one of the best ways to monitor the economy is to keep an eye on what private equity is doing. Frankly, it's one of the reasons why access to services who report on what private equity is doing will literally cost you several $1,000s a year just to see those reports. But you've got Veles in your corner, and I've got friends. Granted, I don't have the full content all the time, but I have enough to be dangerous. The first item from that world is a report from Private Equity Hub, the first half of the new calendar year in 2025, following the election. And given the goings on in the markets was not shocking. That data point being there's been a significant drop in deals being closed in Q1, calendar Q1, and the number of companies for sale was also down. This also includes merger and acquisition activity as well. In the case of the latter, activity dropped more than 18% from Q4. A factual detail who in and of itself is simply what it is, but it is worth noting. The second item is there's a view that the insurance industry may be consolidating further. In part, the view is attention to the insurance industry by private equity is due to slower than normal activity in the PE space at this moment. I'm not so sure about that. 2 areas with specific focus right now are urology providers and insurers of autism treatments. In the case of the latter, that makes me a little uncomfortable. I've got a lot of views on autism, some of which I've shared on prior programs. Overall, consolidation of insurance carriers, whether by segment or overall, is not a good thing. It reduces choice and further empowers denials of coverage, as they know your options with other carriers are limited. PE Hub also went on to report Thursday that Europe and private equity is in a lot more pain than in the U.S., this being due to concerns about their liquidity. Private equity exit strategies are increasing as their portfolios are becoming rather hot. Another word for private equity exits is divestment. So the net of this being they're pulling their money in Europe from existing investments and lowering or cutting continued funding of other investments in the private equity space. Another piece of that report was private equity investment in Europe and the UK is willing to take lower returns on their investments as long as they're able to exit successfully and free up liquidity. Gold in Pennsylvania, the long-running legal battle between treasure hunting company Finders Keepers and the FBI has seen significant developments the first few months of this year. For those following the case of the alleged Civil War gold at Dent's Run in Pennsylvania, this is the latest. Finders Keepers maintains they discovered a Union payroll that went missing during the Battle of Gettysburg. Treasure, they believe, was hidden for safekeeping. About 45 years ago, they believe they located that treasure and requested a finder's fee from the U.S. government. The FBI investigated but claimed nothing was found at the site. The treasure hunters, convinced that the FBI was concealing the truth, took legal action. Their case gained momentum when the judge grew frustrated with what appeared to be the FBI's obstructionist tactics. Over the past year, the FBI has employed various delaying strategies, including disputes over search methodologies for requested records. Their submissions contain suspicious language that suggests dishonesty, including confusion about their own investigative software tools. The agency continues to claim that releasing records would cause great harm to their operations, whatever that means. Finders Keepers has requested a summary judgment to compel the FBI to provide all requested documentation. The judge ordered both parties to submit their motions by April 14th, with a subsequent order directing the FBI to comply by May 14th. I'll be checking the court website again around the 14th to see what may have occurred there, but it looks like something's about to finally break in that case. Ripples in global change. raised the following a few times, and this is the soundbite for this week. The major shifts in the new global economy continue to proceed, much to the anger and frustration of Europe. Will Ukraine be so stupid as to attack Russia during its World War II victory celebrations today and this weekend? Not sure, but you'd need to ask London that question. Even if they were to do so, it's not going to stop where things are headed. At the same time, we're dealing with powerful interests who've not had to change how they operate in hundreds of years, depending on which player we're discussing. That is change on par with the second coming of Christ. These things take time. We'll continue to see a lot of weirdness globally and biweekly assassinations as these things work out. Europe wants a military-industrial complex. The Wall Street Journal recently had what for me was almost a comical take on the European arms industry. Germany this month has asked the European Union leadership to invoke an emergency clause exempting defense investment from spending rules as part of the bloc's 5-year rearmament plan. Not to worry for Turkey, nobody's asking if they want in on this. We're going to discuss Turkey a little later. By way of comparison, Airbus's military arm is the largest defense firm in Europe at 12 billion euros of revenue versus just Lockheed alone at $71 billion of annual revenue. And Lockheed is just one of several major U.S. defense firms. There's a multitude of problems with this. The first is the joke video of the Australian defense ministers sitting around the table talking about who is their main military adversary. No one in the room in the video wants to admit it's China. Then the guy leading the meeting asks, who's Australia's biggest trading partner? Well, again, it's China. So the guy leading the meeting says, so we're spending huge amounts of money to defend ourselves from our biggest trading partner. That's not a one-to-one comparison with Russia, but ask Europe how much they would like some cheap energy about right now. So who is the enemy, Europe? I'm asking for a friend. I mean, historically, it's been yourselves, thanks to the London Corporation, pitting you against one another for the last few hundred years. Then Europe has no history of effectively ramping up anything industrially, unless the U.S. is doing it for them vis-a-vis post-World War II. Yet again, you're committing the classic mistake of history when it comes to war. You're justifying these moves in the name of refighting the Ukraine war. A couple of angry Turkish hackers will do more damage to you than a division of Putin's tanks rolling across Europe. Lastly, Russian oligarchs are still vacationing in Europe, so if you're worried about being invaded, you already have been. No one is marching across the border to occupy Paris. The RAD Group, a technology pioneer worth monitoring. RAD Group, founded by brothers Zohar and Yehuda Zisapel, both of whom are now deceased, are a significant yet often overlooked force in telecommunications technology. Their legacy begins in the early 1980s with groundbreaking miniaturized modems that dramatically departed from the industry's bulky standard, which foreshadowed the compact devices that would become commonplace a decade later. The company strategically expanded into fiber optic and wireless systems before major industry players demonstrating remarkable foresight. This diversification eventually led to the formation of specialized divisions under what was known as the RAD Group umbrella. Each division focused on distinct product lines. RAD Group has maintained dual significance: deep connections to Silicon Valley that spanned decades and a legendary status in Israel's technology sector, functioning as an incubator for numerous successful Israeli tech companies. The current situation is following the loss of both founders, and questions surround the company's direction. Their leadership vacuum creates uncertainty about maintaining their innovative edge. RAD Group merits attention primarily due to their substantial involvement in Internet of Things, or IoT, applications for smart grid technology, and reports of their significant role in the planned smart grid infrastructure that's being developed in the United States. Their positioning at this intersection of emerging technology and infrastructure development makes them a company of interest despite their current leadership challenges. Definitely an outfit to keep an eye on. Something mystical and psyop-y. The winner of the Kentucky Derby was a horse named Sovereignty. If you heard my program about the symbolisms involved in the Super Bowl and several other related examples, the horse's name should not be a surprise nor its message. Yes, I went there. Fort Knox, a lot of fanfare a month ago and now nothing. Will they ever audit Fort Knox? Who knows? Seems odd to bring up such a hot button item as auditing Fort Knox and then nothing but crickets. Shannon Sharp again. On a prior program, noted the legal problems of Mr. Sharp, and according to Crazy Days and Nights, he appears to be having issues finding a good attorney. Noted also his interview program hosted several controversial folks, including Cat Williams, who spoke a lot about hip-hop and Hollywood and the truth behind both. Ergo, someone needed to get that program off the air regardless of whether Shannon is guilty of what he's accused. There's another interview from his program who's floated to the surface, I would note. This would be an interview with Ric Flair, the wrestler, who in the fall of 2023 told Sharp he'd been kidnapped at birth and was never able to meet his parents. Flair's adoption was arranged by the Tennessee Children's Home Society as part of a woman named Georgia Tann, Tann, baby kidnapping operation. Why is this relevant? If you investigate Georgia Tann's background, her unlicensed child adoption agency placed about 5,000 kids all over the country and predominantly wealthy families in New York and Hollywood. Many of the records of her adoption agency were destroyed, and as adoption papers were forged anyway, the identities of those children are lost to history. This would also dovetail with the chats taking place on Discord regarding Robert Kennedy's comments about what was going on at NIH, among other agencies. Specifically those federal personnel moving kids who crossed the border without family members to various locations across the country. I remember vividly asking federal leaders at the CDC when I was there on a project about that program. For those of you who may not have heard me comment on this topic before, I was a contractor around the time of the coup over at CDC and NIH, and I received the email traffic from Dr. Walensky, the agency head at the time, offering both federal employees and contractors the opportunity to escort quote-unquote migrant children across the country. When that was occurring, I asked a senior leader I was working with what sort of guarantees or protections were being offered to the staff if they took part. The person I was speaking with said, "Well, what do you mean?" I said, "Well, to start with, for the federal laws dealing with trafficking." And their reply was, "Well, this is a federally authorized program, and we've been promised nobody will get in trouble," unquote. My reply was, "By whom, and do you have that in writing?" I think quite a few folks out there are sweating right now. Oil and energy. News from Asia and the oil and energy press indicates natural gas is back in vogue over coal and crude oil. The part they're not saying too loudly and buried on the back page is they're not too focused on renewable energy. Orsted, O-R-S-T-E-D, a company described as the world's biggest offshore wind project developer, is signaling challenges in wind power. Impacts include supply chain issues, regulations, and the overall economy. I'd also point out the low-hanging fruit of the best places to locate offshore wind development have for the most part already been built. Unless someone finds an effective long-term method to churn out more power from existing systems, equilibrium may have been reached. On a related note, Germany's output of wind and solar has dropped, requiring an increase in gas and coal-generated power to the tune of 10% more than the prior year. Two things impacted Germany, that being lower winds than traditionally had reduced output, and winds are always less during the summer. To me, this is on par with the power outages in Spain. How are those purely electronic transactions working out for you during a power outage? Equally, what happens when you rely on Mother Nature for power and she doesn't cooperate? Nuclear power, among others, does not have that problem. PricewaterhouseCoopers, or PwC, the large auditing and accounting firm, announced significant layoffs last September. Last fall, it was 1,800 employees and the first major workforce reduction since 2009. Tuesday of this week, they announced 1,500 more cuts, making it roughly 2% of their workforce and nearly 5% when combined with last fall. The unknowns include, is this PricewaterhouseCoopers only? Is this industry-wide? Is there an AI component behind this? Is this due to private equity trying to drive money from their portfolios more than a reflection on accounting firms? From various social media comments, including this rather apt idea, are universities actively preparing CPA students and related for both what the AI technologies can do as well as their potential impact? This is also going to sting a bit as PwC just spent a lot of money, several millions of dollars, on rebranding initiatives prior to these layoffs. The other thing I would point out is that there was quite a bit of social commentary out there on LinkedIn and other sources about the fact that folks working for smaller or privately held CPA firms said they couldn't hire enough folks and had plenty of work. So that also dovetails back into this idea that is it just private equity and other major holders of these firms saying, we want more money out of you, lay some folks off. Major university funding. As we've been covering often on Rogue, the big universities are in trouble financially, whether either funding being cut or funding being questioned as to why those schools should still receive it from the U.S. government. Then the double whammy of those same schools' policies and protections of Jewish students and anti-Semitism in general being investigated has dried up funding from that community as well. One angle the schools are trying to leverage, according to Bloomberg, is bond sales. We'll see what success they have with that. Cuts in brass. Pete Hegseth on Monday ordered a 20% reduction in the number of active duty four-star generals. For awareness, at present, there are 38 four-star officers and 817 generals and admirals of various kinds. Just by way of comparison, recall also that a rear admiral lower half is the same as a one-star general. Therefore, 20% of the four stars alone is 15 personnel. What's sad about the whole thing is during President Obama's administration, he whacked a bunch of folks who the administration felt might oppose them, then promoted a bunch of bureaucrats into more senior roles. You can also use use any analogy you wish for similar historically, whether Rome or the French general staff prior to World War I. So now there's a need to clean house simply from a cost perspective. At the same time, if I was Pete Hegseth, I'd stay the heck out of Dallas this November. Kardashians. Just a reminder, the Kardashians are a psyop. I'm dead serious. You don't think they're allowed to have that level of social influence across both conservative and liberal mouthpieces just by chance. Recall Kim Kardashian appeared on Tim Allen's TV program Last Man Standing, known for its conservative viewpoints, yet they also appear at many high-profile Hollywood events known for their liberal overtones. Not even Switzerland can pull that level of neutrality. If we step back and consider the social depth and years who've passed with their level of social influence, it's not just a psyop, folks. It's a very high-level psyop. Dare one say, even intelligence level and social engineering. We could do whole Rogue programs on the ritual and symbolism alone connected with the family in general, much less individually. Never mind the fact the father of several of the girls was an attorney connected to that ritual death in Brentwood back in the 1990s. Or did we think that murder was solely an act of passion and anger? 764 is not an area code. For those of you who listened to Frank at Quite Frankly on Wednesday, he hosted an amateur investigator named BX. For those of you who didn't hear Frank's Wednesday program, please either catch that one or other interviews she's provided, including William Ramsey on Spotify, among others. Ironically, on the day of Frank's program and the following day on Thursday, a few articles popped up in several places about this same topic, being the group known as 764. The net is this group targets kids and leverages various methods to compromise them, not the least of which is appearing as peers in age to the kids they're targeting. Depending on the article you read or the investigator, the group is described as everything from white supremacists to Nazis to terrorists to pedophiles to satanic accelerationism. For those of you wondering what the heck that is, accelerationism is the belief in parts of the white supremacist movement violent action is the only way to create the coming collapse they feel is coming. In relation to this group, to enable satanic overthrow. That's a very old belief, folks, and goes all the way back to Charles Manson, as well as recent believers in the Ninth Mahdi in the Middle East. In the case of the latter, that person's appearance meaning the end times are imminent. The takeaways are as follows. The group does exist. The FBI currently has over 250 ongoing investigations taking place right now. They do target predominantly kids or young adults. And as always, keep an eye on your kids and those in your families who may be vulnerable. Equally, in my opinion, from what I've read of the group and their activities, this whole thing screams psychological operation, on par with things learned by tactics used by NXIVM, the Church of Scientology, and a laundry list of similar organizations who've all been tied to intelligence services. What their goals are behind this particular iteration is anyone's guess, but look out for your families. If you want to see BX's page on Twitter, that link is https:// the letter x.com/b, the letter B, letter X, _ON_X. The Lion. The new pope has taken the name Leo XIV. The lion symbolism is astrological, and more will be revealed about that in the months ahead. Is this real or simulation? Amazing Polly took some fire from quote-unquote conservative alternative commentators, meaning they're actually paid assets, the last few weeks. If you're looking for Polly, you can find her on BitChute and Rumble. What was their criticism? According to their snarky comments, she treats everything as though it's a psyop. Wow. I sure am glad they don't listen to Rogue News. Well, let's see. Jack the Ripper, symbolic sacrificial deaths during a symbolic year, symbolism and ritual around the Great Depression, the same regarding several wars, several global assassinations, and public ceremonies from the CERN collider to the Olympics the last 20 years. If it's not a psyop, it's certainly ritual and ceremony. Moving into main course items, goings on in cybersecurity. From the news site called War on the Rocks is a story about the U.S. Department of Defense spending $14 billion a year on cyber force readiness, and yet those organizations have never met the department's readiness standards. Further, this has gone on for more than 10 years. As often occurs in these situations, back in 2022, a readiness campaign was launched to eliminate or curtail the things impacting training, among other concerns. What was realized was the problems are far deeper and more structural than creating time on personal calendars. First up, cyber forces in place cannot scale the way they should. That's not the fault of the personnel, but their leadership. Second, behind the scenes, leaders were lowering cyber readiness standards below mission requirements to hide the true state of things. By the way, we saw that same pattern of behavior when it came to certain branches of the military lowering physical fitness readiness standards. Equally, turnover has been horrific. Third, to oversimplify, the physical architecture and networks are not bad, and they are well built for the most part. However, adversaries will simply keep banging away at them until they achieve their goals. This is where the human element is critical, and two prior items come to bear. When those networks are under assault, you need cyber teams to identify and stop the attackers. Because of the previously mentioned issues, this is where the real problem is, the human element. A fourth item is because training is indeed so critical, it's an area where leaders of organizations are simply lying about training completion levels. Speaking of the human element, the defense community has the same problem as the private sector. Those personnel who do not burn out or quit due to career advancement issues will eventually reach the status of being truly ready for their cyber roles they're supposed to fill. Often, the moment that occurs, out the door they go to the private sector. Again, to oversimplify, we have to treat cyber professionals in the defense sector no less than the crew of a tank or a fighter plane's pilot. You don't want unqualified people flying a multi-million-dollar aircraft, and you don't want unqualified people protecting the country's cyber assets. Turkey conundrum. We could probably do a whole program on the situation concerning Turkey right now, and this is not that program. What I will say is, in my opinion, unless something dramatic occurs, Turkey is simply in a physics condition of rest. One might also say the plane is sitting on the tarmac because you just blew an engine. There should be a lot taking place relative to Turkey in politics, economics, regional goals, and all things military, yet they're just kind of sitting there. I sort of want to poke them with a stick and ask them to move or something. For you folks who know the Anatolian region well, you might point out various things going on in Syria, and Turkey's involvement is proof that there's proof of life. Equally, never let it be said the Turkish press and others are not covering with bated breath the mastery of Turkish negotiators, and they are, in some new weapons deals. That's a distraction like the latest with Justin Bieber or Britney Spears, both of whom sadly are essentially on a death watch at this point. Turkey is a very important player in the world's big game. They're not London Corporation or Davos important, but they're still important. I don't think George Friedman has ever written a book on the international environment without dedicating at least one chapter to Turkey in the next 20 years. So why am I bringing this up? Well, for a couple of reasons. As I said, Turkey's important, not the least of which is geographically. Even if President Erdogan were to step down as the leader of the country, I simply cannot envision someone strolling into that mess and leading Turkey back onto the road of prosperity. You could even say they have essentially become the Belgium of that geography. They exist as a country and they have some nice food, but no one needs to contact you for big decisions, and tourism isn't what it was. Their economy is blasé. Their foot is stuck in a gopher hole in Syria. Neither China nor Russia is paying much attention to them right now, and Europe is too busy with their own problems to lie to Turkey again about just one more sign of economic growth and we'll finally let you into the EU. Turkey did recently engage Israel militarily over Syria, and you didn't hear anything about it for the same reasons Rogue is on the air, because we tell you what the mainstream media doesn't. Was it all that big a dust-up? Well, it depends who you ask. It's kind of like the situation right now between Pakistan and India. Officially, Israel knocked out some former Syrian military bases near Turkey. Turkey wanted those bases for themselves, and that's why Israel destroyed them. There are reports of air-to-air engagements between the air forces of the two countries, and also Turkey was supposedly able to shoot down some Israeli aircraft. Neither of those have been confirmed. As at its heart is the power vacuum left by both the United States and Russia pulling out of the region. Turkey wants a pro-Turkey government in Syria, and Israel wants what Britain usually wants anywhere, who is a country divided by sectarian divisions. See Lebanon from 1950 to this moment. There are several official publications all saying they don't know what Israel's goals in Syria are. That's a bunch of crap. It is what I just said it is. That's why it appears to be no strategy at all, because that is the strategy, chaos. In other news, Turkey has been very loud in certain media outlets about their concerns regarding India and Pakistan. I guess when you're trying to stay relevant, that's a safe bet. My final takeaway being Turkey's isolation feels by design. Said another way, just as Europe on a certain level has been removed from their former bigger voice in the big game, I think the same was done to Turkey without anyone really noticing. Recall the rule book of the game. You can knock a player into the ground, but you cannot remove them without a world war. So Turkey and Europe both will just have to limp along. Bots and manipulation. And a night, if you're listening or hearing a replay of today's program, this content is for you relative to our discussion on Discord. My thanks to Patrick Ryan yet again for this content. He calls the following narrative warfare via various electronic means in his overall topic he calls psychosecurity. He's been dropping various statements on various media platforms and then studies what occurs, specifically how governments in general and the U.S. government is leveraging things like ChatGPT tools to assess tweets and similar that people post. He then follows a tweet after studying how it was interpreted with a similar tweet, but filled with even greater degrees of buzzwords and triggers of one left or right narrative. The more of the right nouns and verbs you throw into social media posts, the higher the reaction and monitoring by various tools. The whole thing reminds me of the old rule in Washington, D.C. If someone contacts a congressperson's office and is in opposition to a particular issue, they count that one person as probably representing X number of people from the district. If someone calls and says something positive, it rates even higher because people will rarely call to say something positive. Product companies often have similar metrics that they use. Why does this matter? Among other things, it first reveals the degree of monitoring by the government or others, and second, Patrick's efforts are of a fashion playing them. It's like the friend of mine I've mentioned who occasionally goes to the grocery store and buys baby food even though he doesn't have a baby, or something similar he never buys, because it throws their assumptions and their algorithms off about him. One of Patrick's posts who received the highest response by ChatGPT monitoring was his posting the phrase, "Love is love." It maxed out the reading on the spider diagram under the terms simplification and directness of message. He then posted a phrase, "Islam is right about women," who also nearly maxed out various terms in the spider diagram, including words like anger, moralizing, simplification, overconfidence, and following the crowd. Patrick equally describes this warfare in terms of various parties playing the marketplace of ideas as weapons against you. Equally what he describes as, and I quote, "There are intelligence people on speed dial to psychologically destroy you," unquote. He also says the militant elements in the political left have quadrupled down on their neuromythology because voting and voters do not matter. Canceling people and threats matter, and violence matters. We will certainly see where that takes us. Remember, this is not about people of certain political persuasions on the left or the right. It's about the degree to which the weaponization of manipulation continues to evolve. So with that, be wary, my friends. Equally like the Matrix, sadly, we have people so far gone out there. Fauci could state on live TV he lied, and there are people who will say, well, he's being blackmailed. You have to trust the science. Whoops, I said trust the science. I just triggered a bot. Same message by different means. There's a parallel between the hidden aspects of our modern world and two great authors who many know but do not know their true motivations. On prior programs, we've covered how the world's elites and their belief systems permeate those beliefs into our modern world, whether in movies, music, or other cultural elements. A few weeks ago, I read the lyrics from a song called Voices by the band Alice in Chains, with clear connections between ancient Egyptian beliefs and the lyrics. A frequent reference point in my programs is my constantly referencing the movie Under the Silver Lake, among others. That movie lays out a baseline of these hidden messages by elites in our world. Ironically, the people involved in the film itself being tied to some crazy stuff. My parallel with this is C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien. I'm not suggesting anything nefarious about their works, only the following content as a reference point. You see, Lewis and Tolkien were friends. Second, they were deeply impacted by the global calamity who was World War I. Third, they had differing views on the Christian faith and formal Christian ideology versus agnostic spiritual beliefs. For instance, one of them, and I believe it was Lewis, believed in the more traditional Christian view, while the other, who I believe was Tolkien, believed in a divine being, but not necessarily the trappings of formal religion. Those who know their books, or know Lewis's books, like Out of the Silent Planet, Pelandra, and The Hideous Strength, know the books and their storylines, but perhaps not his friendship with Tolkien. Those who know Tolkien and his books, like The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, know the storylines and the characters, but again, not the two men's friendships and beliefs. Things become even murkier when in contemporary times people may know the Lord of the Rings movies, but not the books or the literary backgrounds. This is especially important when it comes to Tolkien and his later work, The Silmarillion, who attempted to provide more background and explanation in Middle-earth history and the characters. Beyond those books and their storylines is this important consideration. Both authors and their series of books were attempting to tell the same story, but via different mechanisms, or said another way, to convey a spiritual message. Lewis's books were more intellectual in nature, while Tolkien's books used pageantry and character story arcs to keep the reader captivated. What may be missed in their works is both groups of books were attempting to educate by different means the same journey in education, more specifically in the spiritual world. For what it's worth, I've read both of their works when I was younger, and I never realized the correlation until decades later. Like scriptures read in church, their stories are far more than the stories themselves, nor the characters of whom they're part. For many, it's solely the scripture or the book. The hidden enlightenment within remains hidden, either due to a lack of awareness or a lack of knowledge of signs, symbols, and narratives that give away they're actually part of sacred knowledge. With that, V, I yield the floor. And Algo Factory. Go ahead, V.
Very well said, man. Very well said. Well, I want to thank you for coming on, man, and sharing this info with us. And folks, as I do with every single show that Veles puts on, I always tell you, go back, listen to it once, listen to it twice. There's always something to be extracted, and take notes. It's very important. It's a data dump, it's an intelligence debrief, and a trends forecast of where we were, where we are, and where we're going to go. So keep it locked and loaded right here. You guys are listening to Rogue News, and of course, the man of the hour, the one and only Veles. With that being said, we're over and out. Enjoy your weekends, folks. See you all later. Cheers.